Armada. Book 1. Chapter 1, Slanders. June 2057 aboard the USS Endeavour. Lieutenant Colonel Eric Joyce has just finished preparing the visuals in the mission room on the first major operation with Major Ellie Rivers. "We're ready, General Cook." General Alan Cook nodded from the door of the mission room. "Billy, Rick, and Axel. Andrew, are we complete?" asked Alan as he pointed to the mission room. He walked to his chair. He nodded to Eric, who walked towards the floor-to-ceiling window. He closed the window, which showed the planet below. It was receiving a fair amount of light from the sun further towards the ship's bow to the right. Eric nodded to Ellie. She enabled a large screen at the front of the room. She flicked a switch to dim the lights a little bit. Ellie started, "Ladies and gentlemen, please take a look at the screen in front of you. You may also please open the reptile face on the tablets provided for your reference." GX-5 conducted a recon and flyby of the planet the Maquis call Sonarda. The planet has 4 major land areas, with water taking almost 62% of the planet's surface. The largest land area is about the size of the North and South America combined. The large screen showed a rotating planet, very Earth-like, but the water seems darker gray. The planet is inhabited by a reptilian humanoid species that the Macs call Slanders. They have salamander-like skin and eyes, but with 2 large short arms with 4 fingers and elongated legs. These creatures run very fast. Very bad tempers and predisposed to violence. The Slanders are animal eaters, they do not eat plants. Pretty much like your regular standing reptile. Ellie pointed to an upright creature that does look like a standing reptile. Based on the flyby, the 8 large cities would have a total population of 2 million, and from the video you can see they have stone structures similar to our medieval era. The whole planet is ruled by one family, with the 5 major cities ruled by the first 5 sons with the help of their other siblings and their families. Ellie pointed to some pictures of creatures. "The facial similarity is so uncanny," Andrew said, getting the people beside him a little bit more at ease. Andrew looked at Ellie and his thoughts went to her dad, Timmy Rivers, his best friend since high school. Ellie does not know it, but Timmy has always nagged Andrew about how his daughter is doing, almost every week. Often there's not much to tell and he is becoming really annoying. He thought Timmy was so proud she has a doctorate in astrophysics and in chemical engineering. Doctorates in things beyond him and Timmy. As a father, he was concerned that at 29 she has no love life or intention to marry and have kids. Andrew looked at Ellie, blonde, slim, 5 feet 10 inches and a top graduate of the Air Force Academy. She looks like a younger version of her mother Elaine. This was her first space deployment and she gets the top spot, being assigned to GX-1. "Which one is a female?" Colonel Tony Gant asked Andrew beside him. Andrew shrugged. He moved to gaze in front of him, at Ellie, but thought of how Tony is also unmarried at 55. A successful electrical engineer before he joined the army to fight in the war, where he earned a Silver Star and a Purple Heart. He has an MBA and is working on his doctorate degree in business when he was pulled to join GX-1. His hair seems to have grayed a bit at a young age and his muscular body masks the intellectualist within. He noticed his tablet was not even open and he was not even taking notes like the other officers. Ellie continued, "If you look closely at the flyby videos from one of the drones we sent out, there are smaller creatures around these Slanders. These are the Mac's cousins. Our cousins." Eric stood up and Ellie sat down. Based on GX-5 ground recon, these pictures would show that the Macs under the Slanders are treated as pets, work horses, and in this picture, as food. Silence filled the room and eyes centered on the Macs present, who simply looked at the pictures quietly. Eric continued, "There are around 5 million Macs on the planet. Around 500,000 of this figure are in the mountains and thus are not enslaved. But they are a regular target of daily hunting activities that we believe are partly for pleasure and partly for food or enslavement. Our general objective is to remove all the Macs from this planet, while avoiding terminating the Slanders. Our first mission is to establish a large base in the mountains where the Macs are and bring them in, transport them to a planet called Hedad some 30 LY away, where the Macs have built a major hospital and refugee processing base." Andrew was happy to get Eric into his team. An all-around pilot during the war, but mainly a fighter pilot. Before this he was a rich computer engineer with his own company making millions in software sales. He was a college football quarterback with solid good looks and somehow on the reckless side. The Air Force changed his life. It taught him to care about people, especially his comrades in arms. It also caused him to lose his fiancée. Andrew stood and, "If I may, why don't we just transfer all the Slanders out? They are fewer." "Andrew, the Macs would be better off reuniting with their brethren in Hedad," Alan said, looking at Andrew. Just then Major Roger Castro and Gaddon came running into the mission room. "You guys are late," Alan said, showing slight disappointment. Andrew looked at Roger and he sees a cocky Marine who has cheated death several times. He feels invincible. But Roger leans on the genius side as far as military strategy and field tactics are concerned. He does not show this since he is not tall at 5 feet 9 inches, slim-built, unmarried at 36, and his face is always smiling. Which annoys Andrew sometimes because he feels that jokes and making people laugh is his realm, not Roger's. And his face makes people laugh without him even doing anything or trying to do anything, while he had to do something to get the same reaction. Colonel Mila Bond stepped forward and she opened a base diagram. As you can see, the base is in on a small flat area in the mountain. It is entirely cloaked above ground. The Max will dig deep underground, expanding an existing cave system to establish a large processing area for the refugees. 5 large TPs will be set up on each of these levels. The top 2 levels are for our GX teams and mission control. GX4 is in charge of the operation. These are pretty large levels, Andrew said as he played around with his tablet. How long do you think will the Max need to reinforce and reconstruct these caves into a working base of operations? Andrew asked. They started a week before the flyby last week, so they would be done in 2 weeks. We need another week to set up shop with our equipment and medical. Mila answered. How do we move 5 million Max without inciting a major war or catastrophic harm to the refugees? And who was it who said we cannot exterminate the Slanders? Andrew followed. We do have the technology to go in, tag the Max, beam them out. But the sheer volume makes it almost a logistical impossibility. And, General Man, that somebody must have also advised you that not only should we not hurt the Slanders, we need to provide them with alternatives to ease their impending loss of sustenance. Eric chimed in. Are you guys planning to get hold of these creatures to study them? Tony asked. Mila looked at Tony and said, good point. Our team will capture at least 4 of these Slanders tonight and beam them directly into the capture pods, study their physiology, see how they react to regular chemicals to put them to sleep, or if our guns are any good at all. Good idea, Tim, Mila. How long do we have to wait for this intel? Alan said. I believe Dr. Fernandez and his team said 2 or 3 days. General Tim Jeffrey said. Okay, back to the mission. Alan said. Andrew stood and asked, okay, so we need extra hands to tag these Max at close range. How about electronic sweep tags? Sir, we cannot tag them electronically because these tags last only 3 days max. Eric responded. Andrew looking at Gadden and said, Eric, please tell Gadden how many Max will we need to tag all the Max on the planet. Eric looked at Gadden, around 5,000 working for 10 hours while the refugees sleep for the next 3 weeks. Gadden reacted and said, this ship carried an extra 4,000 or so personnel and that's all we have. 2,000 of these are medical personnel and around 500 are technicians for the TPs and other equipment, and the rest are construction crews. 2 weeks from now the first 5 cargo ships about the size of this ship will arrive in orbit, and these can spare around 4,000. Food will be a challenge, but if we move the refugees quickly to the planet base, then we will have enough. Andrew sometimes wonders why Gadden is on his team. He's a very smart Mac, as most Macs are, so nothing fantastic there. He's also very brave, which is also common to Macs. Maybe I'll find out why later down the road. He thought. Alan stood and walked in front of the teams. So while the Macs are doing their thing, all GX teams will conduct intel recons except for Tim's, who will procure for us our Slander test subjects. Look at the tablets and find your respective areas of operations. All activities must be done cloaked at all times. Bring extra cloak bands for emergencies. All team members must bring their tagging pens. Do not engage and beam out if compromised. Finally, first contact will be 4 weeks from now and GX1 will show itself to their king. For tonight's recon, we all deploy in 2 hours. Are we clear? Yes sir, answered the groups. As GX1 was getting ready to deploy, Tony checked all the gears of the team members as Gadden distributed the tag pens and boxes of cloaking bands. We all travel light. Hey Rivers, make sure your camera works this time. Tony said out loud. The team walked over to the transport room and took their positions on the TP. Okay, let's roll, Andrew told the Mac TP operator. Instantly beamed to a barn, they saw some Macs rolled up sleeping on the ground covered with dried grass and leaves. This seems to be a house for Macs serving as horses to the buggies of the Slanders. Andrew told the group. Gadden approached a sleeping Mac and the team uncloaked. He touched the Mac and tried to wake him up. The Mac groaned and, realizing somebody in the barn, quickly stood almost in reflex. Gadden telepaths to the still groggy Mac, hello, my name is Gadden. We come in peace. What's your name? The Mac was surprised seeing another Mac dressed up in the same outfit as the other tall but similar people. The Slanders call me Dogra, which mean cart puller, but my friends call me Tagby. Are you our saviors? The one legend said those not of this land will save us all from the Slanders, Dogra said. Please open your mind to me and let me see your past. Gadon touched Dogra's hands and stared quietly into the dark. Immediately Gadon telepaths, where are the mothers? Lead us to them now. He looked at his team and said, we must move quickly to the site of the mothers. Gadon tied a cloaking band onto Dogra and turned it on. Dogra looked at it and seemed amused, not realizing he was already invisible. Dogra's moves were quick and calculated. The team followed him, trying to catch up with some degree of difficulty. After about an hour they arrived at what looked like a cave entrance. The ground around the entrance looked well maintained and well used. They walked in slowly. The smell of rotting flesh met them like a head-on collision. They saw a Slander asleep and rested on the side of the cave. In front of them were bars of metal tied up with a rough chain and some sort of a round lock. Andrew looked at Roger and pointed to the lock. Roger pulled out a laser cutter pen and cut the chains. He opened the metal gate quietly and the group moved in. He closed the gate and returned the chains to their original position. They proceeded to walk in with night vision lenses and one red gun light on. Smells like blood and decaying flesh. Andrew whispered. In front of them, lined up like sardines with their heads to the wall, were female Macs fast asleep. Some had bulging pregnancies while some females seemed to be younger and thinner. Gadon roused one of the pregnant female, uncloaked and telepaths. Hello, my name is Gadon and this is my friend Dogra and my team. We come in peace. Dogra looked at the female and telepaths. Gadon, I believe we come from the same mother, her name is Bidget. Gadon uncloaked him. The team uncloaked. Dogra, it is good to see you. Your friends look strange. Yes Bidget, they are, and they are here to save us. Please open your mind to Gadon so he can understand, Dogra answered. Bidget reached out to touch Gadon's hand and telepaths, I am opening my past to you. Gadon suddenly became quiet, and as he stared at the blackness of the cave, a tear fell, then some more. He knelt and hit his head on the ground 1, 2, several times while holding Bidget's hand. Bidget shared a tear, then Dogra did what Gadon was doing. He knelt and hit his head on the ground. Andrew stepped in and pulled Gadon up. He looked at his bloodied forehead and, hey, what the fuck is wrong with you? Tony pulled Dogra up. Gadon exclaimed, we must tag all of the females here tonight and beam them to the ship immediately. Now please, we have to do it now. Andrew had never heard Gadon talk with so much tension and anxiety. Andrew nodded and pulled out his tag pen. The team then went around tagging every Mac in the cave. Andrew pulled out his comm unit and, command. General Man, Horner here. We need to beam up a couple of Macs here. Notify Alan, medic, and execute medevac processing for about 4 dozen females and 1 male. Beam GX1 last. GX1, prepare for beam up. The TP operator started beaming the Macs out and sent them straight to the medic hall. At the medic hall, the Mac medic teams and human nurses barely arrived, running from their bunks, and immediately took hold of the nearest Mac they had. It is a rare scene where the medics and nurses were 5 times the number of refugees. Holding their med analyzers on the Macs, they laid the Macs on the beds and proceeded to beam a red light from the ceiling from the head of the Mac to their feet. They got their med dispensers out and connected them to the analyzers and proceeded to touch the Macs on various parts of their bodies. Immediately, the Macs felt stronger. Then silence. The nurses looked around and saw the Mac medics were holding their patients and were all quiet. And then one by one they knelt and started hitting their heads on the floor. The nurses were stunned. GX1 walks in with Alan and saw the same scene they just witnessed in the cave, only this time in more aseptic and modern surroundings. What's that sound? He thought as he walks out of the hall into the corridors and see all the Macs in the same position. Hey Tony, what the hell is happening with the Macs? Mitch shouted at his mouthpiece. All the Macs here at Mission Command suddenly became quiet, then started banging their heads. Mcom, we need immediate beam up for about 6 dozen female Macs and a few males. Notify General Cook and the medics for medevac processing. Beam GX3 last. Rick Logan said. Roger Rick, beaming them to the medic hall now. Rick's comm sounded. Rick, do you know what's happening here? Alan asked. Beats me, I just saw Axel and his team back at the other med hall. Rick answered. Tony, assemble the teams at the mission room and make sure Ezra and Lockton are with us. Alan said. At the mission room, the GX team sat themselves quietly as the entire ship suddenly came alive with crews, Mac medics and nurses running around. Okay Gadon, Ezra, Lockton, we want answers. Alan said. We would like to apologize for our behavior, General Cook. For the past few minutes we have collectively witnessed the most heinous acts from the memories of all the Macs we beamed in. As you can see, it affects all of us Macs that are suddenly receiving these memories in the most profound and unimaginable way. We have witnessed babies being born and eaten right in front of the mothers with their cords still attached. We feel the mother's fear, grief and love for the dying baby who is not even conscious of its surroundings and its body. We see youngsters being literally torn apart, alive, by Slanders wanting to eat them at Slander feasts. We see cart pullers whipped to death because they were too weak to pull the Slander carts. We see Slanders trading babies for swords and shields and see glee in the buyer's eyes, excited to eat the babies. We see our brothers and sisters being beheaded and mangled without reason other than they are too weak to work. Ezra said, stopped and then we feel what they have felt. We see and felt the instant in time a young Mac dies. We feel the dying Mac up to his last second. We see our arms being ripped off, the pain of your flesh being torn, the crack in the separation and breaking of your bones. We feel the teeth of the Slander as they slice into their flesh and see the eyes of the Slanders eating the flesh torn from the Mac's arms or legs or bodies. They are being eaten while they were still alive. Like we were the ones being eaten alive. We felt their sorrow, their feeling of hopelessness, physical pain and hunger, fear of death, anger, and their desire to shut the feelings inside them to stop these feelings and experiences from going into the collective. We felt them clinging to the hope they created in their minds, constantly attacked with feelings of hopelessness. It is the saddest and most pain-filled day for us. Gadden concluded. Then we made a mistake. Our intel, our plans are all wrong. Gadden, how can this happen? I thought you can telepath with the Macs on the planet. Andrew said, his voice a bit higher. All of them have closed their minds to each other to protect each other from bad scenes. They only open the instant they want to communicate something then clammed up again. That is why I cannot track any telepath. Gadden said. We need a new plan. A faster evac. Alan said. Eric, how many cloaks do we have on board? And how many tag pens? Tony asked. Eric, looking at his tablet, we have almost 10,000 cloaks and 17,000 tag pens. Okay, so we deploy all our people tonight straight to where the females are jailed and tag as much as we can and beam them out tonight. Axel said. This ship was designed to hold 30,000 refugees. Maybe 50,000 if you push it. Rick commented. Now we do not have the luxury of time. We need to create a hidden base on the planet to hold the refugees in the meantime. Line it up around with time warp fields. Andrew said. Ellie stood again and opened the wall screen to an aerial view of a mountain plateau on one of the few islands. This island is about 8 square miles and its nearest point to the mainland is 5 miles. We can set up shop for at least 4 million refugees, but it's going to be really crowded since only 70% of the area is flat or almost flat. General Andrew is right, the cave will not finish on time. We have to take hold of the Macs as fast as we can. Any day we wait, several hundred Macs are killed in the most painful way. Andrew said. General Billy Guzman and GX2 walked into the mission room. Roger stood and pointed to the island's high areas. We can cut the top off and transport the Earth to create more land at the far side of the island. Or we can simply blast it off to flatten it. Andrew looked at Eric and, Eric, how many time warp field generators do we need around the island? We really don't need the time warps, we probably need a field cloak. If we move fast and deploy the cloak fast, the base will not be noticed for the next several weeks from the mainland. Anybody on or visiting the island would have to be held in the meantime. One major issue is that we only have 10 large TPs and this means we can only move maybe 100,000 a day tops. The ship's 4 beamers would need at least 2 freed for missions. Ellie said. We can send the crew back to Planet Hedad and have them bring back as much TPs they can get a hold of. Gadden said. Tell the crew to get hold of as many Macs as they can bring back with more cloaks and tag pens. Andrew said, nodding at Gadden. Hedad has only 10 large TPs and 2 equipment TPs. We can get 8 of the large ones and 1 of the equipment TPs. This way our daily beams would almost double. Ellie said. All these TPs can only do 220,000 a day. We would still need at least 3 weeks to execute the plan. The Slanders can kill half of that per day. A mass killing can happen with the chaos. Andrew said. We can create a diversion. Billy butted in. Okay Patton, what's the plan? Tony said. Thank you Tony, for all who do not know, Tony is my second cousin and he's not funny. Okay, so GX1 can try to get an audience with the king and demand for half of all their lands or they will kidnap the queen and the daughters. Since the king will not agree, we immediately beam the queen and the daughters out onto the original mountain base here. Along the way we parade the queen and daughters on land so other Slanders can see and tell the king where we are and where we are headed. The king gathers his forces which maybe will reach 300,000 strong, give or take 5 to 6 days including consolidation from the sun's kingdoms, add travel and then meet us at the foot of the mountain where we set up the time warp field. So we pretend to wait for them ready to fight and let them attack. They get stuck. Then they attack again. Maybe the whole exercise lasts 4 to 5 days. Once we see the attack waning, we beam the king and his family out of the battlefield into the viewing base of the ship where we create a field so they cannot get out. We talk to the king and beam him back to the battlefield. We give him 10 more days to decide. In the meantime we quietly beam the Max out starting from the furthest distance from the battle area. So there's your 21 days delay. Okay Billy, the plan sounds good, but why not just beam the 300,000 out onto the island? Andrew countered. The problem is we don't know how many will be at the battlefield. There could be as many as 800,000 including peasants and supporters. Plus the safety of the Max is still up in the air since there are still Slanders around them. Billy said. Another complication is as in any battlefield, the army needs sustenance and they could bring the Max for food in the battlefield. Ellie said. That is why we need to be able to tag these Max way ahead of the plan. Andrew said. I just got word that we can have 6,000 or so more Max by tomorrow to help with the tagging. Gadden said. So we can finish tagging in less than a week. Tell me Billy, what prevents us from opening 2 battlefronts to split their forces? Andrew asked. I guess, none. Billy answered. Our time warp's fields can only go around this portion of the mountain. Roughly 8 square miles tops. Eric said. Rabina stood and pointed to some ridges in the 3D map. These canyons have very steep ridges. We can use these as a holding area for the Slander armies by sealing both ends. This long area here can hold as much as 100,000. Or we can have them continue on to this high area by the sea by showing the captives. Once the army goes through, we seal their backs by blasting the mountainside or use one-time warp unit and then we provide another show where we are taking the royal captives over the mountain back to this area here with the mountain base here. This action will force the army to turn around through the seaside back to this open field and onto the mountain base. Easily this runaround would be about 10 to 15 days. I always knew you were a smart cookie. Good plan. We can combine these 2 diversions and get 25 to 30 days. Billy said. And while they are moving around we deprive them of their food source and they would be mad as hell to go to war on an empty stomach, Andrew said. Now even Gadden and Ezra get to laugh with the group. We can generate the hologram show from a remote area in the island and beam it to the battlefield. This way we are not in any danger. Gadden said. Alan stood and, so it's decided then, Captain Perek, form your science team to create the holograms and assemble the time warps. We need to prepare the island and this side of the mountain. For the rest of you, and I mean all of you who are not performing ship essential duties, get your tag pens and coordinate with your GX teams and areas with the TP operators. We should target all the mothers and try to tag all of them tonight. All GX teams would provide security to the taggers while doing some tagging themselves. Finally, Mitch, make sure you coordinate the teams, the TPs and the medevac for those you beam in tonight. Dr. Fernandez, it will be a long night. Dismissed. By early morning all the teams have returned. Andrew approached Dr. Fernandez and, Hi doctor, how are the refugees doing? He puts his hand on the doctor's shoulders on his way to his quarters to get a much-needed bath. Dr. Fernandez looked at Andrew and, I believe the ship is almost at its capacity. We are treating at least 25,000 refugees. The nurses and medic teams are overworked. After the tagging work below, they got in right after midnight and started processing the refugees. And they are still at it. So we're good then? I need a bath. Andrew said. I guess you could say that. And I mean both. General Cook, sir, I believe you need to take a look at this. Mitch said as he removes his headpiece communicator and stood in front of the main glass screen which occupies the middle of the mission command control room. Alan walks closer and, what's up Colonel? Mitch pointed to a screen. It seems today is a special day for the Slanders. We are seeing the different kingdoms preparing for some celebration. One of the sons and his entourage has started moving towards their father's kingdom. We deployed a few dozen aerial recon drones in all the kingdoms so we can switch views. We also have some cloaked Mac operators on the ground operating from some distance. They are bringing with them a lot of slaves. Here, this kingdom seems to be rounding up more slaves. Colonel Jenny Green said as she splits the screen to show activities in 4 kingdoms. Colonel, a Mac recon team on the Father's Kingdom has reported that there is a feast for the Queen commemorating her age into greater wisdom. Like a birthday. Keelmill commented. It seems the Slanders holding the mothers are up in arms in all the areas with the loss of their stocks. Green said pointing to a portion of the screen. Colonel Horner, these slaves are intended for consumption. They will all be dead by the time the entourage reaches the Father's Kingdom in 2 days. Keelmill said. We can beam in a tagging team when they stop to rest and beam them out when they finish tagging. Jenny said. Mitch, you really have to give it to these Maquis, even without proper training they are really brave. It's like undercover work is in their blood. Alan said. That's true, General, we are brave partly because we do not imagine the evil side of things that can happen. And since we do not fight or even thinking of hurting our opponents, for countless generations we simply rely on deception, subterfuge, hiding, and secrecy. You could say we are silent operators. Keelmill said. You know, Mitch, you can learn from the Max on how to deal with Eve. Jenny said. Now I miss my wife already. Mitch said. Okay, Mitch, keep monitoring the situation. Right now I believe we should continue with our tagging operations. I want the teams out before nightfall. Tell the TP crew to keep beaming in the mothers until Dr. Fernandez complains. Alan said. Andrew walked into the mess hall and finds his team in one table having a late lunch. Hi Tony, Roger, Gaddon, Major, Captain, he greeted them all. Let me get some food, I woke up famished. Seems like the Macs are happy today. Tony commented. Yes we are, we had several hundred births last night, Gaddon said. The Hedad TPs arrived today and they are still beaming in the extra crew. You know, this ship is getting to be too crowded. Ellie said, showing her tablet and the graphics on the screen. You can say that again, I was told to bunk in with Eric so the refugees can use my room. I heard the ship cannot beam in any more refugees. Roger said. How are you ladies, did you get your beauty sleep? Andrew asked. The women did not answer but continued to eat, rather fast than normal. Sir, you do not seem too hungry. Tony quipped, looking at Andrew's 3 plates full of food. You know, when I started my retirement I intended to get fat, but I was forced out of retirement after only 6 months. I really intended to get really fat. But someone had to save the galaxy. Tony's tablet sends a small beep. My tablet shows that we are to secure the island and start construction of the base. There are some Slanders scattered around that we have to deal with them one way or the other. How are Tim and his team doing? Andrew looked at Ellie. The base is 50% done. The team shifted the focus so that the facility is available for immediate use. I don't think we will be finishing it at all. The Hedad crew and all extra personnel in the ship will occupy it as living quarters. Ellie answered. Mcom has prepared the cloaks and cloak deployment team is ready to go. Eric said, pointing to his tablet. They also tell us that our guns can kill them instantly if we shoot their heads. Mcom is also issuing these darts so we can put the Slanders to sleep. How long? Tony asked. If they get 2 shots, 24 hours minimum. Eric answered. Does that mean we can continue shooting them so they sleep longer? Tony asked. They didn't say. Eric said. Or if we run out of darts, we'll shoot them in the head. I definitely do not have a problem with that. Ellie said. Let me finish the 3rd plate first. You know, this TP business makes me eat more. Andrew said. After a few minutes, they cleaned up their table and proceeded to put on their field uniforms, got their gears and darts. This body armor is really too big for me. Gaddon said, and the team just laughed. At the TP room, they met up with the cloaking crew. Let us go. Andrew said.